Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician.
My name is David Bendler. I'm a film and stage actor and a pop culture enthusiast.
I'm Anne Milleville, a French screenwriter and producer.
This week's VHS selection is John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978, directed by, you guessed it, John Carpenter, and starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasence, Nancy Loomis, aka Nancy Keys, PJ Souls, and Nick Castle. If you have not seen John Carpenter's Halloween, then I strongly suggest that you pause the podcast, head over to the Visually Hidden YouTube channel, subscribe so you don't miss any future selections, check out the video, check out the film, come on back to the podcast because we will be discussing it openly with spoilers. Here we go. Yeah, honestly, when you talk about films with a heavy reputation, I think this really is like the contemporary tidal wave classic. It really is sort of like ground zero for especially the slasher genre as we know it. I mean, there were films with similar themes and even some similar elements, but Halloween is really kind of like the breakthrough for this particular genre. And again, it's another one that's always been there, like for people of our age or our generation. I know growing up, I didn't watch Halloween. I watched Halloween 2 a lot, and I believe I watched the television edit. I believe we had it taped from TV, and I watched that version a lot, like when I was in first grade and kindergarten. Like that was like the scary movie that I was watching as a small child. But again, it was the TV edit, so it wasn't as brutal as the actual film. I don't think I saw the uncut version until I bought the VHS in my teens. But Halloween, it was always like, oh, well, the first one's always the scariest, like it has that reputation. Even when you're a kid, the sequels aren't as good as the original. And so as a kid, knowing that you're watching a scary movie sequel, it's like, well, shit, the original must be like scarier than hell. Like I don't think I'm ready for that yet. So you got to like cut your teeth on a bunch of sequels and then go back to the source. And that's kind of what happened with me in Halloween. I had seen the sequels before I sat down and watched the original, and I saw parts of it because it was always on TV, but I don't think I sat down and watched it straight through until I was, this is also kind of absurd, but probably like 10, So I was an old man of the horror genre at that point. That was probably around when I started really getting into Halloween as a film. And once I saw the original, there was nothing else. Like everything else just kind of like evaporated and like just blew away with the wind, like gone. Like this was it from that point on. Once I saw it, it was game changing. And then I think that was really probably I don't even want to say my gateway into John Carpenter, because I was like nurtured on Big Trouble in Little China. So to just know that it was the guy who did Big Trouble in Little China, that kind of gave it a little bit more clout in my view. And then I got into Escape from New York and Escape from LA. We talked about Escape from New York on this podcast last year. And then, of course, you find They Live and The Thing and just this body of work in The Fog. And it's just like Assault on Precinct 13, which predates this film, but it's part of that body of work and that time period in his career where he was just on fire. And Halloween is really kind of the culmination and teeing off point for that career, because he builds with Dark Star, which really is kind of retired for me. But Assault on Precinct 13 still holds water. And then Halloween comes along and just knocks it out of the park. And you're just watching that ball fly for like 10 years straight. And it's amazing. That's kind of how I arrived in Haddonfield, through the sequel chain, and then found my way to the source, to the Myers house, and I've just been living in there, living in darkness, staring at a wall, not seeing the wall, looking past the wall at this podcast, inhumanly patient.
Okay, for me, it was the first watching. I watched it for the podcast. I knew about it. I knew about the the title and the fact that it's a horror movie. It's quite famous here in Europe. And I always heard about it in a very positive way. Everybody was always really positive about it. Like, it's one of the best, you should watch it. But I don't like horror movies, as you know, so.
You used to not like horror movies.
That's true. That's true. You make me like the genre. I enjoy watching Escape from New York. We did that. We talked about it in the early time of our podcast. So yeah, I was really surprised about this movie. The fact that it's low budget and they do something really great with it. It's something that really fascinates me all the time. So that's why I was curious about this one. And also the fact that there is Jamie Lee Curtis in it, because the only films that I watched with her was I saw True Lies first of all, and then I watched Freaky Friday. So I have the image of this actress, like Freaky Friday actress, So imagining her in a horror
Right.
movie, I was like, okay, let's try. And yeah, I like this movie, Halloween. Definitely, it's a good one because it's not as violent as I expected. So, but so much tension in it. But yeah, we're gonna discuss about it. But definitely maybe one of my favorite horror movies. Yeah.
That makes my heart happy.
Yeah. I think Steve and I both just fell in love, Anne.
Sadly for me, I don't remember the first time I ever saw this movie, because for me it's almost like breathing. It's always been there. But yeah, like Pete, of course, I guess regionally, the second one was constantly on WPIX in Shocktober. I have vivid memories of my cousin scaring the shit out of me, and it was a high tension moment and tension swelling, and she just grabbed my shoulders from behind and I fell off the bed. So that's always a fond memory that I have from childhood. But these two movies, because the second one takes place like minutes later, there's always been one story in my mind. So I feel like I've just seen both of them for forever. But yeah, this movie for me is hands down my favorite horror movie of all time. It's my desert island John Carpenter film. I mean, and I love a bunch of them, which is really, really tough. But if I had to only have one, this is the one.
Yeah, I think this film really just kind of showcases and displays all of John Carpenter's strengths and talents and skills. It really was a calling card for him because, again, kind of how we talked about with Wes Anderson a couple of weeks ago in Rushmore. It's like that's his second film, right? And Halloween is essentially his second professional film. If we're not counting Dark Star, which started as a student film, this is really where you start to see like the vision of the filmmaker and the traits of the storyteller and even the skill as a composer come through the frame to the audience, and you start to build the track record. And so Halloween, I think, is really kind of that point. It's usually in that second film where you really get to see what the director is about and what their strengths are. And for this film, again, yeah, it was super low budget, but it was filmed in and around Southern California, Hollywood, Los Angeles, Pasadena. So there's that rich pool of talent. Like John Carpenter is a graduate of USC, which was the top film school. Like that program, it didn't exist in the 30s and 40s and 50s. So he came out of it in the late 1960s, early 1970s. So he's like of that first generation. He learned from the actual masters, from Howard Hawks, from Alfred Hitchcock. Like they would come in and speak to him in his classes. So just having access to those types of lectures. It doesn't matter if you're not in a studio system. You can work independently because you have those tools in your toolbox. And I think John Carpenter just uses every tool to perfection in this particular film and what he was able to execute and achieve on that tight budget.
Yeah, we talk about a lot on here, the economic filmmaking style. And this is a shining example of just taking a couple simple things, a house, a car, really just bare bones stuff that most people have access to. If you're a filmmaker, you have a house, you probably have a car or an apartment or something, you have some kind of home, and just bringing that fear or that horror home to you, which is the place you're supposed to feel most comfortable. And I think this was shot in 20 days. So when you think about, not having a lot of money having limited resources, there was no real, aside from Donald Pleasence, there's really no star power at that time. Jamie Lee Curtis is a massive star now, but she wasn't then. John Carpenter maximized everything. Having his buddy Nick Castle, here, throw the mask on, be the monster. John Carpenter doing the score himself, him and Deborah Hill, writing this thing together. She's producing. Tommy Lee Wallace is, you go find me a mask and alter it, and like, talk about, DIY punk rock attitude, do it yourself. I mean, this is the epitome of that.
Yeah, honestly, I think next to Donald Pleasence, PJ Souls probably had the biggest career going into this film. She was in Carrie a couple years before, and one of the reasons that they cast her was because of her work in Carrie. And she also starred in Rock and Roll High School that same year, 1978, which was also, had Dean Cundy as the director of photography. So, like, imagine that. But Jamie Lee Curtis, yeah, she definitely came with the pedigree of everything. And I believe it was Deborah Hill who saw that, knowing that she's the daughter of Janet Leigh from Psycho, and just the influence from that film on this film, I think can't be overlooked. But it's the simplicity, I think, that really makes this one stand out. Like, it doesn't overcomplicate it. The plot is not convoluted. There are not all these like crazy relationships that come out of nowhere and serve no purpose. Like, everything is just straight down the line, matter of fact, and very relatable and very believable. Even the supernatural powers of Michael Myers, and his unstoppable evil, like getting shot, getting stabbed, falling off of buildings, like, it works because everything else is so grounded.
It goes to the edge of absurdity, but then it doesn't cross over. Like, unfortunately, some of the sequels get unbelievably absurd.
Well, I think the thing that also kind of just helps the audience accept it is Donald Pleasence and his commitment and devotion and performance. Like, hearing those words come out of that man just gives it a whole nother like layer of credibility versus some unknown, inexperienced actor would not be able to read those words with the gravitas that he's able to deliver. And so by that point, you've been watching it the whole movie and he's just sprinkled in there, and it's like, well, you should have told somebody. I told everybody. Like, he's so fucking pissed at like nobody listening for this whole movie, and I can relate to that.
Me too.
I can relate to people, like, you're trying to tell them something and they are not listening, and it just gets more and more frustrating, and it just gives you more and more of a connection with that character. So for me, I'm right there with Dr. Loomis, like, combing the streets looking for this guy, because when you know, and he knows.
That's something I don't like in horror movies, is the absurdity in the script. And I was really surprised that it's really not a far-fetched synopsis. It's clear, it's simple, and it makes sense. It's quite relatable. And the fact also it's in an ordinary residential neighborhood, you relate to it. So from the beginning, I really was into the story. It was really efficient from the beginning, even if you have many mysteries in it. The fact that you don't understand why he's after Laurie or why he's wearing a mask or things like that, you don't really care about those details because you're in the intensity of the moment, maybe by the music also, and Myers' presence also. He has something, he has I cannot say a look because you don't really see him, but you feel his presence when he's around. So, and you feel the anxiety he makes to the others, especially Dr. Loomis, as we just said. It's my favorite character, by the way, in the movie. Dr. Loomis, I love him. Really, because the anxiety he has from the beginning, you feel for him, and you don't understand what's going on, but you understand that if the doctor feels something wrong, you have to worry about it, and you're right at the end. So yeah, definitely the intensity on this character and also on Michael Myers makes you feel really worried about what's going to happen. And even if you don't have many violence, you have goosebumps because of the atmosphere, and that's also something I like, the fact that you don't see many blood or many violence, many weapons, but you feel that something bad's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, this movie definitely thrives on atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it comes from just setting it on Halloween, when it's already kind of has this like psychological foundation for people where it's like, oh, it's a spooky night and there's, ghosts and goblins and trick or treats and this and that. And so like people go into that day just looking for fright.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it actually shows up, it's the greatest mask that a character and a story on this day could wear, is actually being a brutal murderer.
What I love about the storytelling in this is Michael doesn't speak a word, right? Okay, so he can't monologue about how maniacal he is or what he's going to do to you. We get that from Loomis. We see Michael's first despicable action in the very beginning of the film. And then after that, he doesn't say boo. So we have the Loomis character who's talking him up. He's evil. There's nothing in his eyes. I've watched him for years. And so he's building that thing up. And then you have that creepy voyeuristic situation where Michael's just watching these young girls go around the neighborhood doing all these different things. And so while Loomis is giving you the evil and the eyes and all this on one side, you've got him just breathing heavy and just, stalking these women, and it starts to become terrifying. And you know what he's capable of, right? You saw him kill somebody, he'll kill his sister. And so then the audience knows that it's going to happen again to these women. And then he gives you small scares, like Tommy Doyle runs right into Michael at the school, and that's supposed to give you the fright. And then he's stalking the kid because he saw the kid with Laurie earlier that day. So he's really on the prowl. You're just waiting for him to strike, which is terrifying.
Yeah, about Dr. Loomis, I just realized something when you were talking, Steve, that this guy is actually the witness of the time we don't know about Michael Myers, because you see at the intro his childhood and how it started. But there's a long part of his life you don't know what happened. And actually, Loomis is the witness of that, and the fact that he's so worried about him outside the mental hospital. You realize that this guy, when he says he's not human, or I don't remember how he says that exactly, but you understand that for him, this guy is not a human. From a doctor, you said, oh my God, what that beast, you want to know about it. And that's why I said earlier, we don't really care about the details, because you're so much absorbed about his personality, the personality of the murderer, that you don't care about what happens in details. But I love that intensity about Dr. Loomis.
Yeah, I mean, he paints this portrait of Michael as this uncaring, unfeeling, empty vessel that's just out there to do one thing, not unlike Jaws, not unlike any other kind of maniacal force. And it gives it this really creepiness to it. And it gives you all the believability through the Loomis dialogue.
And it really is in that monologue that he gives in the Myers house. That's really his big scene there, where it's like, and it's kind of in the middle of the movie. It's like at the beginning of the night, they go and check out the Myers house with the sheriff. And that's really where you get like the clear cut insight. Because prior to that, he's just frantic and trying to get him and trying to rally anybody who will listen to, like, no, we've got to stop him. He's going to Haddonfield. He's going to do this again. I'm telling you right now, please help. But it's in that moment where he gives the monologue about the devil's eyes. And it's like, this is getting a little serious now. And up to that point, you've only seen him, murder his sister as a child. I think maybe it's around that point that he kills the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, when you kill the dog, it's like gloves come off, like we're going there now. But he hasn't like touched any of the babysitters. Yes, we see the mechanic's body, so we know he's still doing stuff, and he's attacked the nurse to steal the car. So we know he still has these violent tendencies, but we don't know the lengths to which it will happen until that monologue when Loomis explains very explicitly, like, there's nothing in there.
Mm-hmm.
No reason. He's basically a Terminator.
Yeah.
Can't be bargained with, can't be reasoned with, doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and will not stop until you are dead.
Yeah, well, I always said that I felt like, whether intentional or not, Cameron was influenced by this for the Terminator. But the simplicity is what I find to be its biggest virtue, because it does not bog down with all this exposition. You have one tight monologue from Loomis, and it really does the trick. You can get right to, we establish who he is. He's a killer. He escapes from this thing. Now he's on the loose. And then you can get down to building that tension. because this all culminates in that final climax in the third act where, Laurie's going to come face to face with the guy who's been stalking her, and she knows he's been around, but then she thinks maybe she's seeing things, get a grip on yourself.
Well, but yeah, and that's like that starts before the monologue, like right from the day she walks up to the house and puts the key down and he sees her, and then he comes
That's
out
it.
and he watches her, and then the whole day. So like there's that promise set at the very beginning, like moments after we meet Laurie, that she and Michael have a date tonight.
Right. Exactly. And it's I always thought of it almost as like a haunted house story. Like she came in touch with this evil and now it's following her around.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're building the tension, we have the building of these relationships between these three women, which for my money is some of the best relationship building. And a lot of it's due to Deborah Hill.
Yeah.
I mean, she really was involved in the intricacies of what these girls would sound like, what girls that age would sound like, and how they would relate to each other. And it's because of that, building that relationship while the tension's building around them, because Michael's following them around town, we're getting to become attached to these women. But then we know, fuck, that the shit's going to hit the fan in a little while. Because I always say with modern horror films, if I go into the film and I find the characters to be obnoxious and annoying and just rude and stupid and overbearing, and I find myself rooting for the killer, you failed. Where here, I don't want any of them to go, and that's the credit to Deborah Hill, because she really, I know everyone says it's John Carpenter's Halloween, but Deborah Hill is a massive part of this production.
Oh yeah, I mean, as the co-writer and as the producer, she had a great level of involvement from the inception of it. John Carpenter brought the style and the direction and the music and a lot of those elements, and especially the Dr. Loomis and the Michael Myers lore. But Deborah Hill brought kind of the heart and especially the fear for the characters. She brought the believability of all the victims, really.
Yeah, and the name Haddonfield. She grew up in Haddonfield, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably brought also the sisterhood between the three girls, as you said. It's really convincing. I was surprised of that, because in that small conversation they have just right after school, you understand who is who. And even if I was a bit annoyed by Annie, I didn't root for Michael Myers. So well done.
Yeah, but I think it was also really good to have like three very distinct personalities among those characters, because that defines them instantly, and they're not all blended together as just like a little teenage girl clique. You have like the kind of quiet, booky, mousy girl in Laurie, the very responsible one. You have the cheerleader party girl in Linda, and then in the middle you kind of have like the cynical tomboy ball buster in Annie, and they just create this nice dynamic of characters that aren't clones, and it makes you connect with each of them. So then when they are in danger or are in peril, it's like, no, not that one. Not like you have your favorites among the group, and then so when Laurie goes into the house, you don't necessarily know that she's coming out.
Yeah.
This could have been like a fucking Night of the Living Dead situation where like you're done. And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I know people who have watched this movie for the first time now, right? Thankfully, Anne's not one of these people. But they say, well, that's not scary. It's boring. Well, no, when you think about when this movie came out, right? Yes, there have been slashers before it, and there have been horror movies before it, but the modern day slasher as we know it, this is the blueprint. And up until that point, we had Jaws, right? Was a horror movie technically, but slasher wise, you had Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a bit of a different animal, and then you had Psycho, right? Those are the big marquee names as far as widespread popularity. This was the first of its kind in that regard. So when I hear people say, "Oh, it's not scary," it's not. But it is scary. If you just forget, put aside the things you've seen recently, focus on the story and the characters. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I don't think, so people who have that opinion, I don't think they really give the movie its due in that sense, because at that time, I could only imagine being a 16-year-old girl in 78 going to see this in the theater. And if you happen to be a babysitter, I don't know. I'm going back to that job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, for sure, it's not. I wouldn't say it's not scary. It's not fair to say that, but it's not violent, and I think people expect that in horror movies to see violence. It's not a bloody movie, you know. I mean, I mean, you won't see much blood. It's just as we said, the intensity, the music is a big part of it, of the of the scary part. So if you expect blood, yeah, you're disappointed, but definitely it's a scary one.
Blood on the screen, like, it's exciting, but it's also cheap. This movie goes for taste and style and just focusing on the story. The story isn't about blood gushing out of bodies. The story is about this psycho killer on the loose,
yeah,
stalking these
exactly.
babysitters. And that's where it stays, and that's where it exists, and that's what it accomplishes and achieves, and like creating that tension and those scares and the sense of excitement and peril for those characters, especially Laurie at the end when she's running from him, you know
Absolutely.
and he keeps coming.
Yeah.
She gets him with the knitting needle, and then she gets
Mhm.
him at the closet, and then thankfully Loomis shows up there at the end. But prior to that, they even tangled in the Wallace house, when he slices her and she falls off over the railing. It's like that's really like the start of their brawl. And it just
Yeah.
kind of bounces back and forth, and there's all these hurdles that belong there. Like, yeah, she's gonna lock the door, he's gonna break through the door.
Mhm.
He's already locked the glass door, she's got to break out, and then trying to get somebody to come help you on Halloween, screaming bloody murder down the street, and people look out the window and, yeah, I'm not falling for it, good night, kids. It's just so well played. But I think a big part of this film falls on the music.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
music does a lot of the heavy lifting in this particular film, as far as setting the tone and creating the tension and suspense and just driving the ideas behind it home. And it's a very minimal score. There's only a handful of cues that are then sprinkled throughout and maybe expanded upon or trimmed down. But in addition to the musical cues, there's all these little stings in the soundtrack.
Mhm.
When Michael comes into the frame and there's just this like jarring noise that, like, it's like a
A
jump
synthesizer.
scare, yeah. And I love watching this movie with anybody, because even though I've seen it a million times, when I'm watching it with somebody, and even if they've seen it a few times, when those stings happen on the soundtrack, I'll jump just to scare them, because
Yeah.
like they're not going to get scared from the movie, but they'll get scared from the sudden action, and I know it's coming, so I can time it perfectly.
Mhm.
So whenever like Michael pops into the screen, there's that sound, oh, and then the people next to me who are watching it will like freak out. So I just try to transfer that energy into the viewing.
I'm glad I didn't
That
watch
might
it
maybe
with
sound
that's
you.
maybe that's what people need to do. Yeah, well, it would have been exciting, that's for sure. But maybe that's what that younger generation Steve was just talking about, people who don't find it scary. It's like when you watch it with them, you just need to like show them how to watch it. It's an interactive movie if you let it be.
capturing all these images. Dean Cundey, man. It's just the lighting in some of these shots, the just where to place the camera. And this is, innovative because this is a Panaglide, right? It's the first time anyone used the Panaglide.
Outside in the dark, and it looks so beautiful. There's no noise on the frame, and the moonlight that is
Mhm.
illuminating these scenes and shots, that is an artificial light that he just has up on a post, but he has it in like just the right spot with the right filter on it, and it looks like the moonlight. So like our eyes have adjusted to the darkness of this story. Even the composition within the frames. I mean, Dean Cundey, he had done a lot of low budget films prior to this. And he didn't get into the cinematographers union, I think, until Escape from New York
Hmm.
was so he worked for like another like 3 years with John Carpenter and others until he was like professionally in the Union. And it's the work that he did with John Carpenter that put him on Steven Spielberg's radar. He actually got offered a chance to shoot Poltergeist, but he had to turn it down because he was committed to Halloween 2.
Oh,
Imagine that.
damn.
Imagine that. But
I'm
then,
torn because I love both.
But then, down the line, he shoots Hook. And he shoots Jurassic Park after he's
Back to the
already
Future.
shot the Back to the Future trilogy and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So clearly he's a selling point to this production, and he's an asset to this production. It's not just the John Carpenter show featuring Deborah Hill. I think Dean Cundey plays as big a role on the technical side of this film as either of them and the whole cast, because
Absolutely.
it's a movie and it's a moving image, and he's capturing it in such a beautiful, elegant way that I think, when you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that movie is gritty as like any sand pit. It's just the dirtiest thing, and the dirt will never come off of that frame. But Halloween is so beautiful. I think that's one thing that allows it to travel to other audiences and to be accepted by other audiences. Like, I don't think anybody can sit down and watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre and enjoy it. As great as it is, it has some boundaries built into it. Whereas Halloween, it's kind of almost like good, clean fun.
Yeah, there's a classy, sleek cleanness to this movie. But I mean, for Dean Cundey, for me, probably one of the greatest shots, if not the greatest shot in the movie, is when Laura just finds all her friends. She's crying in the hallway, and then Michael's face just appears
out of the
out
darkness,
of the blackness. That in itself is fucking terrifying.
And that was something that John Carpenter asked Dean, like, is there a way we can make it seem like the audience's eyes are adjusting to the darkness and just bring him out? And Dean just had a little dimmer, and he just put a little light under the frame and just brought up the dimmer on that mask to get the exposure. And it's one of the greatest shots in the film of great shots. There's so many iconic images in this particular film. All you got to do is an image search on Google, Halloween 78, and you'll see shot. But that one is so effective and technically like savvy. It just speaks to the brilliance that is Dean Cundey and John Carpenter.
And in the same regard, the mask is flat white. It's solid white. There is no shading on the mask. It's the lighting and the positioning of the camera that gives it this life. And Michael's always looks menacing and different in a lot of the frames, but it's almost like his face is moving and animated, and it's not at all. It's just a flat white mask, which is, I would assume, had to be a pain to try to light properly or to get the desired effect that you want. So, I mean, hats off to Dean Cundey and John Carpenter's guidance there, because it's one of the, like you said, the most iconic images in horror movie history.
Like right out of the gate with the cinematography in this film is that opening scene, which is really, it's one shot, but it's 3 different takes. They just seamlessly put the cuts in of the different takes for that opening scene and sequence of Michael murdering his sister. And it's just so effective because it's a point of view. You don't know whose head we're in. We just know what they're seeing. And even when we see the hand reach for the thing, it's out of focus. We don't know. It could be a guy, it could be a girl, it could be a kid, it could be anybody. But there are some clues sprinkled in, and the more you watch it, the more you pick up.
What I like the most, because it's the first time I was watching. It was the first time I was watching it, so I didn't know what to expect. And when you have the creepy music in the opening credits, and then you have this scene filmed through the eyes of Michael's, so you don't really understand who is behind the knife. And when you see this cute little 6-year-old boy, you're like, holy cow, what's happened? You're like, really, I was really surprised. I didn't expect that. So I think because you watched the movie so many times, maybe you don't remember the feeling you might have the first time you watch it, but it's really surprising. You really don't expect a 6-year-old kid to be behind this murder.
Yeah, and for me, I was robbed of that because I had seen the sequel, so I knew he killed his sister as a little boy. You get that information in the sequel, so like I knew going in,
You were
and
spoiled.
to have it start there, even with that knowledge, it's still captivating, and it's still interesting. I don't want to say it's exciting, because watching a teenage girl get murdered is not exciting, but
Right.
the technical execution of it is exciting. The point of view and the stalking and the going up through the house and the action itself, and then the escape and the reveal and the pullback on little Michael, like that is again an iconic shot of just little Michael in his clown costume holding the knife, and that's something that echoes throughout the rest of the series.
It puts you in there, like you said, it's not necessarily exciting, but it forces the audience to be in there in that moment. It's like almost like you're doing those things.
Yeah.
So not just seeing through Michael's eyes, but you're almost like part of the murder. It just throws you right in there from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, like talk about like holding the audience hostage. Like now you're an accomplice.
Right.
You know what never really made sense to me though
What's that?
is why after school has let out and Lori has gone home and she's gotten her pumpkin and Annie has picked her up and they're smoking their joint, and they run into her dad at the hardware store with the alarm bell ringing, that has just been robbed of a rope, Halloween mask, and a couple of knives. And so we're led to believe that it's Michael, who's been wearing the mask all day.
Yeah.
So why is this hardware store alarm going off all day, and the sheriff's like going home after school to see his daughter and all this stuff? Like why is he just now getting to that hardware store? Like those poor neighbors.
I never thought of that. I always think of like when they're smoking pot in the car and they see Sheriff Brackett and she rolls down that window. He doesn't smell that. Like that's the funny thing. There's lots of imperfections in this movie, but for me, it's a perfect movie.
Yeah, well,
it's one of those things where I forgive it all.
Yeah, because it's not dwelling on it. It's not really. It's just it's using it when it needs to move on. It's facilitating it, and because it's so simple, you're not questioning these things.
Yeah.
If it was really complicated and your mind was like really engaged and working, it's like you're trying to keep up and you're trying to keep track of all these things. Then you start looking at all these details a little bit closer. But because it's so simple, you can just sit back and enjoy the ride. When it comes to the film, the on-screen talent, the cast, and Donald Pleasence is the star in the film. I don't want to say he carries the film, but he and Jamie Lee Curtis really do a great job of those two worlds of Michael, where like the pursuit and then the bait really come together, and so I like I mentioned in the video, Donald Pleasence is only in 15 scenes.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are just one camera setup. It's very economical filmmaking. It's really maximizing, the time you have, and with the star, so you're not bogged down. You probably do a couple of rehearsals and then a couple of takes, and you just like nail it. I love the shot when he's coming out of the hospital, like with the one administrator talking about how, he can't drive a car. Well, he was doing pretty well last night. Somebody around here probably gave him lessons. Like that whole scene. It's all one take, and it's a walking monologue, and you don't see any crew. You don't see any equipment. It's just these two guys in this moment, and then it's just A to B, and they hit all their marks, and that's it. Scene. It's perfect.
Donald Pleasence never ceases to make me laugh in this movie. When he's yelling at that guy, they don't listen. When he has a moment of levity and decides to screw with Lonnie by the house.
Oh, that's one of my favorite scenes. You want to talk about that? I love that scene. Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
Yeah, and then also it's partly for the kid's own good. You don't want to, you don't want any part of this. Just keep it moving.
Yeah.
But also the little smirk he has, like he's like a 7-year-old boy, and then he gets the shit scared of him by Brackett.
Because it's a great thing because it makes him a real person. It makes him a real character. He's not this stoic, like serious in pursuit of madness, like doctor, like he's actually a person that has different interests and feelings outside of Michael Myers. So I think it's just a great little touch for his character that on Halloween he gets his trick.
Yeah, I have the utmost respect and admiration for Dr. Loomis in this movie. I love Donald Pleasence in this film, and for my money, he's my favorite character in the film, but probably my favorite protagonist in any horror film. And I'd say one of my favorite protagonists in any film. I love this character so much. What I love about it, I mean, I have the benefit of seeing all the sequels, but just even if I don't like them, he's fantastic in them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I love about one of the qualities about the character is the level of personal responsibility he takes from Michael. Like, it's like he's devoted so much of his life to this kid, and he feels like he's a failure. Like he couldn't get through to him. And now it's like his personal mission to hunt this guy down and stop him. He oversees his transfer. Like, he just wants to be there at every step because he feels he's responsible.
He's the only one who really knows what Michael
like,
is about.
Yeah, and like the responsibility falls on his shoulders. Like, he has to protect this community from this guy, and what I love, like we said, like him teasing Lonnie makes him human. He's terrified when that piece of gutter hits the window, and he pulls the 6-shooter out. He's petrified. Like, he doesn't want to go up against Michael either, but he has to do it. He's like almost like the Van Helsing, to Michael's Dracula in this. And one of the qualities I always absolutely adore about Loomis, but it's also the amazing acting ability of Donald Pleasence, the tenderness he brings to certain moments, the comedy, the severity. And I think, like I said, he sells Michael to us in a way that I think if Michael spoke wouldn't be quite as effective.
I disagree on a point, but I didn't feel like Dr. Loomis felt like a failure with Michael Myers. If he feels, I mean, in my opinion, he knows that he's a lost cause. So for sure, he feels guilty about the fact that he escaped because he tried to warn everybody, nobody listened. So maybe he feels that he should have be more strong in his arguments to make this not happen. But I'm not sure he feels that he failed with him. He says all along that it was a lost cause. This guy is not human. So I'm not sure I really feel that way. But I noticed that I was really really attached to this character during the second opus. When he gets stabbed by Michael Myers, I was like, oh my God, no, Dr. Loomis. I was almost crying. And the fact that he's kind of the savior of the situation, the fact that he gets back and he puts him on fire. I was so proud of Dr. Loomis. I love that he's the savior of this situation, really. Even if Laurie is a big part of it too, but the fact that he did the sacrifice, it's excellent.
When I was a kid and I was watching, especially part 2, I know that they mentioned that he's his doctor and everything, but for me, I always saw Loomis. My first impression of Loomis was like he's almost like a detective. He has like the trench coat and he has the pistol, and so I always thought he was just this like super detective tracking down this killer. And so even now, like even though I know it, I still have like that impression of him in my mind as a detective rather than a doctor.
But I don't disagree with that. That's what he becomes, right?
Yeah.
Like tracking Michael down, following the clues. He finds Phelps, truck, the mechanic Phelps, and like there's like walking around the neighborhood, looking, where could he possibly be, trying to talking to people. He's become a detective out of necessity. I have to find this guy. I've got to stop him. And sheer will and a 6-shooter. That's all he's got.
Well, but I think it also just makes the character a lot more dynamic You
Yeah.
know, he's not just a doctor. When you think of a doctor, you think of like an academic in a suit sitting in an office writing
Mm-hmm.
reports and papers, or a doctor wearing like a lab coat. And here he's wearing his trench coat. He's got his pistol. So it just makes his character a lot more interesting, and
Absolutely.
it makes the audience, I think, invest in him a lot more. And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I think the real victim here is probably Bob. He just walked into the wrong situation, like the girl.
Walk into a
Michael
buzzsaw.
Michael was around, like Linda saw Michael. Isn't that Devon Graham? I think he's cute. Like Linda saw Michael. She knew there was a creep in the neighborhood, and
Mhm.
she didn't pay attention. Annie, same deal. Poor Bob. All he wanted to do was get his trick and his treat and a beer.
Yeah.
So I feel bad for Bob.
Pour one out for Bob. But I mean, listen, as like you said, as great as Donald Pleasence is as Loomis, I mean, Laurie, Jamie Lee Curtis is fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, and the range of the character.
I mean, I know she's Laurie's written to be a bit more studious and mature compared to the other two ladies, but still, there's something in Jamie Lee's acting that doesn't feel like she's acting. As far as the maturity is concerned, it's there, and that's why we buy her as this responsible person. Especially when Annie's like, "Hey, can you watch Lindsay? I gotta, I'm gonna go out for a little bit." And when El Jerko found out a way to sneak out, and we're gonna go have a good time, and she's like, "Sure, what's one more kid to babysit?" And she just takes it on the chin and stride, and just like you totally buy her as this responsible person, and as an audience, you feel okay with the kids being with her. I think if Linda or Annie was the one babysitting the two children, we'd probably be a bit more worried. Like, oh God, I don't know how this is going to end up for all three of these people. But because it's Laurie, the old Girl Scout comes through again, it's like, again, believability goes a long, long way. And, so you feel like she has a bit of a fighting chance just because she's got a good head on her shoulders.
Yeah, but you know what? As great as everybody, like I love Jamie Lee Curtis and her portrayal of Laurie, but for me growing up, it was always PJ Souls.
Oh, listen,
And it's always going to be PJ Souls. It's always going to be Linda, and not just because she's the party girl having a good time and giving the free show, but because it's PJ Souls and she just has a charisma about her. You watch Rock and Roll High School, where she's Riff Randall, obsessed with the Ramones, and you can see everything she has to offer. And even I knew her from Stripes. Before I saw Halloween, I was weaned on Stripes because it starred two Ghostbusters, and I had to watch that movie like religion in conjunction with Ghostbusters. So PJ Souls is the love interest of Bill Murray in that movie, and it just that affection for her vicariously through John Ringer transferred over to this film. And so PJ Souls, she always has a special place for me.
Let me tell you something. I've had a massive crush on PJ Souls for decades. She's just adorable. She's so much fun. She's a great actress.
Well, I think where she really succeeds with the character is the tagline. Everybody remembers the Totally Girl.
Totally.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. And the inflections that she puts on it throughout, like, it just makes her, again, she stands out. You remember her. It's a performance. It's a character. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah. But even, you appreciate this more, but when Ghost Bob is in the doorway and he's not responding to her because she still thinks it's Bob, that range of, okay, all right. She feels like dejected and she feels like, upset that he's not responding to her, and you see it in her face that she feels like, okay, well, whatever, and she's kind of vulnerable, and so there's another bit of range just in that small glimpse. So she's, with Bob. They're very vulnerable together, and in this situation, and then like, oh, all right, well, he's kind of being a jerk to me now. That's what the
Don't
fuck?
answer me.
Right. Don't answer me. Okay, but like if you watch her eyes in that scene, yeah, it says a lot. She's a talented lady.
Yeah, I'm not as fascinated as you are about this actress. She's a good actress. I have nothing to say against her, but yeah, I didn't expect you to talk
She's
so
our
much
Viggo
about
Mortensen. Okay. I mean,
No, but as I said, I was really convinced about the three female characters, and especially Jamie Lee Curtis, as you said, a great performance. And I was really surprised about the moment when she learns that Annie is arranging a date for her. So you see that she's happy about it, but in the same way she's fearing about it. So I like the balance she has between those two feelings at the same moment. And one of my favorite scenes of the film is when at the end when you see her at foreground, and in the background you have Myers resurrecting, I mean getting up like a zombie. I think it's
When he just sits up.
oh yeah, it's incredible. This scene is incredible, and I like the fact that she's worried, she's crying, but she's strong at the same time. I mean, she's really brave when you think about it. The fact that she's going to that house where she knows that something weird is happening, she cannot call the police. I mean, she's just a teenage girl, so I love this character too. I mean, she's and the performance is incredible, really.
well, she could have easily said, "Okay, kids, we're leaving the house," and ran
Yeah,
out with them, but she
yeah,
doesn't. She sends the kids down the block to get help, and she stays there to like, "I'll deal with this guy. You guys get away while I'm doing this,"
yeah.
which again speaks to that maturity. And she's a little spitfire, I mean, getting caught in the window and spilling the butter over herself, and just her thing with the dog. Oh, here's Lester. He's this dog hates me, and it's just like you totally buy her as a seasoned babysitter who's been there
Totally.
1,000 times. Totally. And yeah, it's just it just makes it very human, very relatable, and then as an audience we fear for them.
And the little Tommy also, I love this character, so cute. And he understands what's happening with this guy. I mean, he doesn't understand everything, but the hide and seek game they have, I like it. It's increased the tension.
Mm-hmm.
It really is interesting because a lot of the movie, I know we've said it rides on this, it rides on that, but when you get down to it, it really rides on Michael and how effective that silent performance is. And
Mm-hmm.
Nick Castle is a friend of John Carpenter's. He was a primary portrayer of Michael. I mean, occasionally Tom Lee Wallace had to do it for inserts or stand-in moments. Deborah Hill also stood in and was the hand of young Michael in the beginning, getting the knife. And Tony Moran is the face of Michael at the end for the unmasking. Even the little boy at the beginning. So Michael is played by like 5 or so characters, but Nick Castle is the primary guy walking around, and just the way he has that very slender build. He's not a big guy. He's not big, muscular. It's not Arnold Schwarzenegger stuffed into that jumpsuit. Like, he's very unassuming, but the presence that he has. I always love the scene where he's watching Tommy Doyle walk from school and he just walks along the fence and just like, he almost glides. He's an apparition, he's a ghost.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, the physicality in this is remarkable because it creates this, like you said, a haunting presence that's just floating through the town.
Have you ever noticed how they're not in the correct locations in those houses?
Yeah, because the doors are reversed.
The doors are reversed and the geography is all backwards on the house. Like the Wallace house, you can see when Linda and Bob show up, they walk in and then there's a whole other room to their right as they walk in. But when you look at the house, the house stops there.
Yeah.
And then at the Doyle house, the doorknob is on one side, but it opens from the other side on the inside, and the windows don't exactly match the inside and outside either. So it kind of makes you wonder, Like,
but then you don't even care because you're so into
exactly.
fuck. Is she gonna get? Is she gonna? And then Tommy Doyle is taking his sweet time, coming out. All right, I'll let you in. And like, kid, hurry the fuck up.
Yeah,
She's gonna get
you only get it when you watch this movie a
Mhm.
lot because it's so well executed. And again, it's so simple. It ties back to that thing I said earlier. Like the simplicity lets those flaws just disappear. You know, the palm trees in the background, the hardware store robbery, like all
the
these.
placement of the clothes when Deborah Hill's hand goes to pick up the mask. When she
Yeah,
puts the mask on, there's a different. The
yeah.
clothes are moved differently.
All these problems, all these plot holes, all these continuity, it doesn't matter because it's so well executed. Like the misdirection that's going on with the direction is fantastic.
You know, when Laurie discovers all the dead bodies, it's quite unrealistic also. The fact that at the perfect moment one body appears and another one, but it's so well choreographed. You know, it's like a dance, and then you see in the dark Michael Myers coming up. I love that moment. It's really maybe the coolest moment of the film. I'm not sure I can say coolest because it's quite terrible, but visually speaking, it's really well done.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think of like, you know, 'cause I thought about this the last bunch of times that I watched the movie, is when she's in there discovering all the bodies, he's in that other room just waiting
Yeah.
and waiting, and that's a whole level of sinister. Like he's like listening to the screen, like I'm going to let her come out, and then I'm gonna get her.
He wants the
But
drama
just when she
effect.
flies over that banister,
Yeah.
right? When she flies over that banister and goes down, first of all, what a great shot with the camera, you know, flipping and whatever. But then when he's at the top of the stairs and dun 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 dun, and he starts to descend, it's like, oh my god, this get the fuck up! Like, is her leg broken? Like, what's like? Is there bone coming out? We don't know what's going on. And then she just starts hopping away. It's just that whole it's one of the greatest climaxes of any film ever. It's just that entire sequence.
And
Unbelievable.
what a great scream Jamie Lee Curtis has. She really is like a scream queen.
This movie to me is just like this, the epitome of the season. It's the epitome of a slasher film. It's the epitome of Halloween, the holiday. This just, for me, it just wraps it all up in a nice little package. This is the one.
It's a real shame what they did with those sequels.
But, I went in very hopeful, and first one was okay. Some things I disagreed with, but for the most part, I'm like, you know, comparatively to some of the ones in the past, this is pretty good. And boy, did we slide down ever so quickly.
You're talking about the David Gordon Green series?
Yes.
Yeah, no, that whole thing was a horror show for
Are
me.
you talking about the Rob Zombie? What are we talking about?
I'm talking about all of them, honestly. Like this movie. This movie could have been just a standalone thing that
should have been
spanned time and was like, oh shit, you know, like the way like it didn't need a sequel.
No, it definitely not.
I disagree because at the end of the first one, you want to know what's going on because he's not there anymore. I mean, he got shot. Did he have a bulletproof vest or something? No, because he's bleeding. So you want to know what's happening. So I think the second opus makes sense in a way. Even if I agree with you, it's not the quality of the first one, but it's often the case. You know, when you have a second movie, you most of the time you're disappointed about the fact that they did a sequel.
But think about how much scarier it would be knowing that he's still out there.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things I love about the end of the film is all the still shots of this was the living room, this was the bedroom, this is where all this heart, and then you hear the breathing and then the music. It's like, oh fuck, the guy's still out there.
Like that.
That's so creepy.
That was the intention. Like leave the audience on edge. You know, and then when you get to the sequel, it kind of takes some of that wind out of the sails.
So I'm in agreement with you, Pete. I don't think it needed a sequel. However, I love part 2 so much. And I will say this, if you choose to go forward in the series, my personal opinion, my personal preference, you watch 1, which you did. You watch 2, which you did. The next best one is H2O. And that's where I would leave it if I were you. But the honorable mention for me in the original series is part 4.
Yeah.
It's the closest to the original as far as the intention. It has an unbelievable ambiance and feel of the season, Halloween. And Loomis gives a great performance. So if you want to watch the Dr. Loomis stuff, 4 is a really, really solid entry. After that,
yeah, if you want to go further with Dr. Loomis, you go to 4. If you want to go further with Laurie Strode, you go to H2O, which is part 7.
Technically, he's in parts of 6, right? That curse, and he unfortunately passed away.
5 and 6 are shit.
Yeah,
6 has Paul Rudd in it, but it is shit.
But that's his first film, so the expectation's low. But
you won't love Halloween 6, I promise.
Oh, no, Halloween 6 is a train wreck disaster. 5, again, if you want to see Donald Pleasence, that's the only reason to go, because the rest of the movie is really bad. It does not hold up well.
And it doesn't follow 4 as well as it should. Like 4 leaves it at a point where it's like, whoa.
Yeah. And you just let down. You just let down with 5. I've gone back and watched 5 subsequently, and it's, oh boy. But 4 is a very, very solid entry. So if you want to continue, if you want to see all the Laurie stuff, just go to H2O, and then you could be done.
1, 2, 7.
And if you want to see more of Loomis, you watch 4. Very good.
But I'm confused. You see more of Loomis, but he's dead, right?
After that,
I mean.
Well, see, now you got to watch part 4.
Got to watch part 4.
You're telling me that he's not dead at the end of the second one?
Questions.
Wow, that's breaking news.
I'm telling you to watch part 4.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's so this movie has a lot of sequels and reboots and requels, and
it's probably the most confusing timeline of any horror franchise I can think of.
So like Steve and I just said, like if you like Laurie, 1, 2, 7. If you like Loomis, 1, 2, 4, and that's it. That's all you need. That's all you're gonna want, really. The rest of the stuff. The rest of the stuff is just a curiosity to kill time.
Yeah, you'll regret watching some of the other ones. It'll put a bad taste in your mouth for sure.
And the Rob Zombie remake, I never walk out of a movie, but I came pretty damn close on that one. I was super duper disappointed in the 2007 remake. I found my movie stub. I didn't even remember it existed. I was like, I saw Halloween in 2007.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I did. It was one of my first dates with my wife. We were dating. And at the time I was like, I enjoyed it, but then like when I went back and watched it again, I'm like, this is the assassination job they do on the character of Loomis in this movie is fucking atrocious. That's one of the biggest grievances I have with the film, and there's many to have. And the second one is
I still haven't seen Halloween 2 by Rob Zombie, and I don't think I'm gonna. But then the David Gordon Green series comes along for the 40th anniversary of the first film, and they were supposed to make that a direct sequel, and I know a lot of people liked it. I was very disappointed, mostly because they had an opportunity to like reinvent the series. They had an opportunity to make The Empire Strikes Back a fucking slasher movies, and they just cherry picked and repackaged and repurposed and threw in some unnecessary adolescent humor and some very disposable characters, and it was just a big letdown, and it just went downhill from there. So for me, that new trilogy is garbage, and I'm never going to watch it ever again.
That's funny, because I thought that with the first David Gordon Green entry, there was a lot of promise, even though there was things I really disliked inside that film comparatively compared to Curse of Michael Myers. I'm like, well, this is a better fucking movie. This is at least it's a step up. But then Kills, there are things I like in Kills, but I rewrote that movie, and I thought what I came up with was far better than what they put on. And then the last one I can't even talk about. It was a travesty.
So there you go, Anne. 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 7, however you want to slice it. And part 3 is just for fun. Part 3 is just for fun. It's an oddity. It's a Halloween story, but it's not a Michael Myers story.
Yeah, okay. I've become a massive advocate for this movie.
I'm gonna watch number 4. You gave me the envy to watch number 4, but the third is not about Michael Myers. You said. I'm surprised.
No, it's just a Halloween story, because
that was the intention.
After Halloween 2, they wanted to keep making sequels, and so John Carpenter thought like, oh well, what if we turned it into like an anthology series where every year we tell we release a Halloween movie with a Halloween themed story, but it's just this horror story that takes place on Halloween or has to do with Halloween, and it's not tied to Michael Myers. And what shot that in the foot was part 2 having Michael Myers in it, because then people expected Michael Myers. So when Halloween 3 came along, it really didn't do well, but it has gone on to get the recognition that it deserves, because it is a great horror movie and it is a lot of fun, and it does stay within that tone and that vibe of the original. But
Yeah,
it's
'cause
just it's totally different story.
That's what happened with me when I was a kid. I didn't, I didn't go to see it in the theater. I was small, so I didn't know. And then when it came on Channel 11, I was like, all right, I get to see this one. And 10 minutes in, I'm waiting for Michael. And half an hour, I'm waiting for Michael. And then 45 minutes, I'm like, what the fuck where is he? And then it dawns on me, he's not in this movie. And I felt betrayed on a very deep personal level. I was like, what the fuck? So for years, decades, I fucking hated that movie. I wouldn't talk about that movie. And Pete's like, well, I think you're being a little unfair. It's like, fuck that. It's dead to me. And then I when Scream Factory put out that box set, I bought the entire box set because I'm a maniac. And I'm like, all right, I'll watch it again. And I put it on, I'm like, oh, yes, it's charming in its own ways. And this is kind of cool. And it's got Dick Warlock in it. And okay, Alan Holdsworth and Carpenter did music, and okay. And then, and then I have this love affair with Tom Atkins now. So, so I was like, well, Tom Atkins is fucking awesome. So yeah, all right. And now I watch it every year because I just enjoy the movie and I have a lot of fun with it. And Tom Atkins is the man. Like, he's the man.
Having Steve say all that, and now it's recorded, that's like one of like the highlights of my life, honestly. That he came around on Halloween 3. Like, you don't know
it was animosity.
Yeah. It was like he had a wall up against this film, and I was just trying, like, with a pickaxe, like, trying to break through. No, man, come on, you got to come to the other side.
Well, I've been hurt before, Pete. I've been hurt before,
but
so
not by me. So anyways, I think, the lasting legacy of this film is indisputable, but when you get right down to it, it's really like all you need is this. And then everything else is just for curiosity. If you want more, it's there, and that's kind of cool. It's like a horror feast. You can fill up on the main course, but if you want extras, there's more, there's plenty. You might get, the sour flavor in there, so you gotta know what's good on the platter. For me, it's really this film. Like, I watch it like religion, honestly. Like, I'll just throw it on. Like, I put it on last night and I watched it last week. It's like a go-to. Again, it's like a bedtime story,
and it moves. Listen, this movie, the legacy, I mean, obviously we said it's the blueprint, right, for slashers going forward, even to this day. Michael's a cultural phenomenon. I mean, they've sampled the theme song in different rap songs, I believe. They've mentioned Michael in rap songs. Busta Rhymes is even in the that treacherous 8th installment. It's everywhere. This.
I wrote a song about this movie.
Yeah.
It's savage. The Devil's Eyes by it too. Check it out. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, it's board games. We have there's a Michael video game coming out, and then like the next year, even stuff like The Undertaker from WWE, that sit up he does in the ring, got it from Halloween. I mean, the reach on this film is quite remarkable.
And that's funny because I'm not an expert as you on horror movies, and the moment when Laurie is on the phone with what she believes is Annie making a joke again, and she says, "Oh, stop joking with me," and actually she's just here breathing Michael Mayer. I was watching it and I was like, oh, it's like Scream. Hold on, no, it's not. It's more Scream like this movie, but it was surprising because that's my reference in horror movies. So I was glad to recognize that it inspired one of the films that I saw.
I love the balance, how it takes place over the whole day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this film really is like Halloween. You start in the morning going to school, and it's kind of split nicely where it's like you follow throughout the whole day. And then even when you get to part 2, it's a continuation of that night. So you really get like, Halloween after hours in part 2, and it goes up to the next morning when Laurie's rescued from the hospital. So it's a day she'll never forget, that's for sure. That will about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We will be discussing a completely different film next time, so be sure to head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations. You can catch Steve and Bendler on Instagram over at Steve's Pop Culture Corner. Ann and I, of course, are also on Instagram as well as Letterboxd, so you can follow us over there and find out what we've been watching and see what we think. And until next time, get your ass away from there.